people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
The undisputed super featherweight champion of the world, Alicia the Baum Gardner.
That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Like Alicia. I fuck with Alicia. Heavy, right? But, you know, I also manage a girl she recently fought, right? So for me, it's like if she was on some type of steroid or enhancement, if she did it, right? If she did it. But with her explanation as to what happened, she said she didn't know if she was taking it. For me, if you find that valid as a sanctioning body, then that opens doors for any other fighter to come in and say the same thing and knowingly take something and just pick a random dude and give him a couple dollars and say, just tell him you gave it to me and I didn't know.
But didn't Canelo do it? Didn't this one do it and that one do it? Like the men been doing
All
it
that,
for the longest.
but a lot, they were stripped or they were suspended or, you know what?
Is boxing insider Sarahfina on the Boxing Voice giving her 2 cents on the ongoing Alicia Gardner situation that she is in connection to because she's one of Cristina Leonardatu's teammates, handlers, so to speak. And what she's saying isn't wrong because what she's saying is what I've essentially been saying here on the channel for weeks, that the World Boxing Council's hierarchy of thought, their reasoning, that even though Alicia tested positive for a banned substance, they're not going to penalize her because the test doesn't prove she knowingly took it.
Anybody could say that.
And if you go with that reasoning now, another fighter in the future who tests positive for a banned substance can turn around and say the exact same thing and use this situation as a precedent.
It's a slippery slope.
There hasn't been much new news in connection with this story. None of the alphabets have stripped Alicia, the WBA, the WBC, the WBO, or the IBF, the Michigan Unarmed Combat Commission. They haven't done anything.
I'm not saying that they should or shouldn't. I'm just telling you what it is.
They haven't done anything.
I don't care if they haven't. You want to know what I think? I think Alicia is far too attractive for me to care about this kind of stuff.
What?
Attractive women are entitled to special privileges. That's the way it is. That's the way it's always been. And she's an attractive woman.
What?
I'm not going to pretend I'm mad at Alicia. How many fighters have you seen test positive for a banned substance and get right back out there like nothing happened?
You want me to clutch at my pearls? You want me to cry about it? You want me to be mad about it? I'm not. I'm indifferent.
I don't care.
I'm not telling you to feel how I feel. I'm just telling you what it is and what I think. And if you want to know what I think and you're here, so I'll assume that you do. The sooner Alicia Gardner gets back out there and has a fight, the sooner that she can move on from this. If it feels like the conversation and the subject has stagnated, is because there are no new developments. While she is seemingly free to fight,
She still hasn't.
there's no fight date, there's no potential opponents that have been announced, no rumors and rumblings about negotiations with a specific fighter or specific fighters. Look at Conor Benn. Conor Benn had the same kind of situation, but people don't talk about it as much anymore because he has fought 2 times since then.
Oh, sure. There's always the odd guy that brings it up.
But the more that he fights, the more he gets out there, the more that conversation becomes old and gets pushed to the background. The most recent headlines involving Conor had nothing to do with the BBBOC or that banned substance fiasco. It was in relation to a Gervonta Davis fight, and that took the spotlight. That was the center of the conversation, whereas with Alicia,
There's no new news.
everyone's last memory of her is in relation to the Leonardatu rematch and what happened afterwards, the banned substance fiasco. So she's got to have a fight to move on from all of that.
To make it old news, she needs to announce some new news. And it may be awkward at first.
You take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and there you have the facts of life.
The facts of life.
I used to watch that show. I would like to see Alicia Gardner share the ring with Delphine Persoon in her next fight. Former champion Delphine Persoon in her next fight, who when last I checked, she was in a pole position to challenge Alicia for her belts by way of not one, but several alphabet organizations. A fight like that could make people forget.
Why Delphine? Why her specifically?
Because Delphine Persoon has done enough since dropping a decision to Katie Taylor in their rematch to warrant a title shot. Delphine has earned it, as well as Delphine being a familiar face, having pushed Katie Taylor to her limits, to the brink.
She's a familiar face, she's a fearsome fighter, a fearsome puncher, and a fight between her and Alicia would shift the focus away from the past.
Focus on the present, focus on the fight. Get people talking about something else. That's how you do it. I mean, think about Conor Benn and think about how focused people were on his anti-doping fiasco and how the subject quickly changed once the Chris Eubank Jr. fight became a conversation again. A potential Gervonta Davis fight became a conversation.
Once it came time to start talking about the next fight, which is really what we're all here for, we're here for the fights more than the controversy.
Yeah, boxing fans like to pretend at times, but nobody's really that altruistic. If they were, they wouldn't watch boxing altogether. They wouldn't be watching Tyson Fury fights. And
He had his own anti-doping fiasco. That didn't stop you from watching him, though.
the same applies to Canelo. The same applies to a lot of fighters. So you'll forgive me when I say that Alicia Gardner is far too attractive for me to care.
I don't.
What do you think? You think I'm going to stop watching her because of this? I'm not.
And neither are you.
So book a next fight. Men's super lightweight news. Eddie Hearn says deprived British boxing public needed Taylor versus Catterall 2 ever since Turki Al-Sheikh and the Saudis became a formidable force in the sport of boxing. You will notice that a good number of fights, big ones, have been shifted away from domestic boxing scenes, and
Some fans don't like it.
this feels like Scott Quigg versus Carl Frampton, Hearn told ProBox TV. This feels like David Hay versus Tony Bellew. This feels like Farrell Crotch versus George Groves. That's what we need. We've missed it. I've really missed it, you know? I think we got a really special fight on April 27th. We need this for British boxing, so forget the profit from the show. Understand that we need to deliver. If we don't bring these big moments to British boxing and just continually take big fights internationally, British boxing won't be the same. The basics of it is, fights are very expensive now, and this fight needed to go on pay-per-view, but DAZN felt that with all of the big fights coming up with Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk, that we should be offering these kinds of fights to the domestic crowd.
What makes it possible?
What I told you. With the Saudis bankrolling Dimitri Bivol's next fight and Anthony Joshua's next fight, but Matchroom aren't the ones on the hook for those shows, and they're not coming out of Matchroom's wallet, that creates a cash surplus that they can then use to make other fights.
That's what they're doing.
DAZN felt that with all of the big fights coming up, Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou, Fury versus Usyk, that we should be offering these kinds of fights to subscribers non-pay-per-view. That's what we wanted to do when we went to DAZN. But purses continue to go up. It has to make business sense. Sky Sports came back with a big offer to put it straight on pay-per-view. Other broadcasters as well. And then I went back to DAZN and said, look, all of these broadcasters want to put it on pay-per-view. You've either got to put it on pay-per-view or you've got to pay a load of money and give it to subscribers for free. And thank the Lord they gave it to subscribers for free.
But how do they benefit from that?
Anyone in the British boxing scene, the British boxing public that wants to see this fight, and they do want to see this fight,
That's why it's sold out.
if they aren't already subscribed to DAZN, they're going to have to be if they want to see this thing. Using this fight strategically to bolster DAZN's subscriptions by not making it a pay-per-view, because if nothing else, you'll make it back in new subs.
Even if it's just for that month, even if they only subscribe to see this one fight, just this one fight,
You can make the money back that way. You can make the money back that you put up in order to do the show. And subscribing to DAZN, even if it's just for 1 month to see this one fight,
it's value for money when it comes to existing subscribers.
since it's not a pay-per-view for them and non-existing subscribers who may sign on for that 1 month, to them, it might as well be a pay-per-view because they're gonna have to pay to see it.
You understand?
If you feel slighted or shortchanged by that as a non-existing DAZN subscriber, need I remind you, Sky Sports was going to bill it as a pay-per-view anyway.
It's not like it would have been cheaper for you if Sky would have got it.
Listen, I think what Saudi are doing is amazing, Hearn explained. Without them, we wouldn't be seeing the fights that we're seeing, but we've still got to make sure that we're seeing the big fights here. And the problem is, with all of the purses that are going up in Saudi, naturally, fighters want more money. They don't say, I'll take less money to do it in England. So you've got to put the money up, and it becomes expensive. We're making money globally, but at the same time, even if the margins aren't as wide on the British shows, we can't just go, we won't do them.
Still gotta do them.
Because British boxing will fall backwards, and this is the kind of fight that's going to help us continue that momentum. I'd say that in the last 10, maybe 15 years or so, British boxing has been growing and growing. It used to be a lot more insulated than it is now.
Here in America, you didn't used to hear about fighters from over there.
Not as much as you do now. Over time, the UK boxing scene has grown, and it really is one of the more fertile boxing markets. But if you want to keep it that way, you can't outsource every fight. You can't deprive those paying customers, those fans.
They're hungry for a big domestic clash.
DAZN put the money up to ensure that their platform gets the rights to the fight. We needed to put the money up, Matchroom, particularly DAZN, to make sure that we can bring big fights and not just on pay-per-view. It's going to limit the audience. It's going to get on everyone's nerves to keep paying pay-per-view all the time for fights. So yeah, it was a big result for us.
I remember not but a few weeks ago when the fight was being tabbed, when it wasn't finalized yet, before the presses, before the back and forth and the banter.
I remember seeing people say that this fight has lost momentum, it's lost steam. It's been nearly 2 years since they initially met.
There was a waning interest in the fight before it was finalized, but after it was finalized...
You saw interest grow when they did the kickoff press conference and both boys were going back and forth. You saw the fight gain traction, gain momentum. You saw interest in the fight grow. That the British boxing public is hungry for a domestic clash, that showed up in the ticket sales because the fight's already sold out.
It's like what I told you about Amir Khan and Kell Brook. Yeah, maybe both guys are past their best.
Maybe the fight could have happened sooner. It should have happened sooner. But bottom line, so long as you put those two guys in the ring with each other, the British boxing community will show up. They want to see it. They love a grudge match.
You don't always need a belt to sell a fight. There was no belt on the line in Kell Brook versus Amir Khan. There's no belt on the line in this fight between Josh Taylor and Jack Catterall.
They don't need it. They don't need a belt to sell it. The vitriol, the bad blood between the fighters, the history between them, that's enough. That's enough to sell the fight.
It's a real treat for existing DAZN subscribers, and for non-existing DAZN subscribers, if you want to see it, you're going to have to pay. But it doesn't cost quite as much as a pay-per-view, now does it?
Smart bit of strategy from the people over there at Matchroom and DAZN who did what they had to do to get the rights to this thing. Oddly enough, it's going down at 140 pounds where their initial meeting took place, and I would have thought that Josh would have pushed for the fight to be fought at a catch weight at just above 140 pounds, which might be a lot more accommodating for his statuesque frame.
A lot of people feel that he's outgrown the weight, even though he himself didn't say that.
But look at his last two performances. The Teofimo Lopez fight, the fight with Jack Catterall a year before that.
Creates an air of intrigue because they hate each other so much.
He knows he has to make it right. He knows he has to put a stamp on it. We wouldn't be here now if he didn't. But the question is, can he? Can he do it at 140 pounds?
We'll find out in late April.
And you sparred him, so you know he's very talented.
Yes, he's talented.
Do you remember the German guy? I don't know if you saw some German heavyweight that came to Oxnard. Benavidez knocked him out in sparring in like 40 seconds. Talented guy.
Benavidez, I wouldn't call him puncher. I cannot say he's a hard hitter, but he throws a lot of punches with really sharp. So, and when you accumulate a lot of those punches, you get knocked out. That's how he get this. Like one punch, I couldn't tell that he's really hits hard, but he can. He knows how to land these punches in the right time, and a lot of them, which is accumulating in your head, and you get knocked out.
Yeah, no, it's true. I'm live here. A lot of the fans on the live want to know if.
That is Alexander Gvozdyk, who sat down with Eli Sekbak, did this interview some time ago, long before this news broke of Gvozdyk facing David Benavidez.
Irrespective of all the 168 stuff, the Canelo stuff, the polarization of David Benavidez as a fighter and Canelo.
Irrespective of all of that and what tends to monopolize the conversation, I like this fight. I'm looking forward to it. This is a fight I can get behind because it has a genuine air of intrigue. And what caught my attention about this interview is what Gvozdyk said about David Benavidez's power.
He doesn't have one-hitter quitter power, which is what I've been saying. If David Benavidez gets a guy out of there, it's through accumulation. It's through volume punching, not concussive power. He's not like Artur Beterbiev.
Artur Beterbiev is a pressure guy too, and he's a volume guy too. But this guy's got so much power in both hands that he can completely change the outlook of a fight. Change the complexion of it with a single shot, a clean shot. And David ain't got that kind of power.
Don't let his fans hear you say that.
They do is they watch him go in there with all these guys that he's bigger than. Guys that he's not only bigger than, but guys who aren't punchers like Kyron Davis and Ronald Ellis, Demetrius Andrade. He pounces on these guys, essentially walking through them because he's big enough to walk through them.
And they don't have the power to keep him off. They're not punchers. Caleb Plant, Demetrius Andrade, these are not punchers.
The Darrell guy, he's not a fucking puncher either. If he were, he would have got Avni Yildirim out of there. Do you remember that fight?
Chris Eubank got Avni Yildirim out of there.
Darrell didn't. The guys that David Benavidez is normally in the ring with, guys like Darrell and Andrade, so on and so forth, these are not punchers, so they can't get his respect, they can't back him off, but that might change. If he moves up in weight, that might change at 175, because as Gvozdyk stated,
he doesn't have one-hitter quitter power. When he gets a guy out of there, it's through accumulation.
Accumulating punches can be difficult when the guy catches you in between, when he has the height and the length to catch you.
I don't understand.
When you're taller than your opponent and you're bearing down on them, they can't fight you from the outside. David Benavidez is normally taller, longer than his opponent, so when he's stepping into his punches and bearing down on them, they can't fight him from the outside because they don't have the height or the length, in many instances, the power
to pot shot him or fight him off. They don't have that, but at 175, yeah, that could change.
Look at Gvozdyk. Alexander Gvozdyk, who's a tall guy, even for 175, and he's got power. We know he's got power. You see what he did to Adonis Stevenson years ago.
He almost killed him.
So here you have a tall guy and a long guy with power who can be fleet of foot. He's not a stationary target. Alexander Gvozdyk can move.
Right?
Now, most people are highlighting his hiatus from the sport, not realizing he's fought 2 or 3 times. He snapped back that stint of inactivity a while ago.
Talked about it here on the channel. He made his big comeback on the undercard of a Marv Nation show.
And I understand that he's in his mid-30s, but I also understand that he's naturally bigger than most of the fighters that David has fought, that in many ways he is a bigger puncher than all of those guys.
Presents challenges for David that they don't.
They didn't. So while so many of David Benavidez's fans are focusing on Canelo Alvarez, David himself can't afford to do that. He can't afford to still be thinking about Canelo. He's got to focus on this guy. Yeah, it's possible that because David ain't got to boil down to 168, that at 175 he'll feel a bit better, fresher, maybe even a little stronger.
Yeah.
Caveat is, you're trying to get used to fighting guys at 175, where the guys at 175, they're already used to that. They're already used to fighting bigger fighters than you've been fighting.
They're already used to fighting big punchers.
What makes the fight so intriguing for me is, how will David Benavidez handle it when maybe he's not the biggest guy in the room? Maybe he's not the biggest puncher.
What's he gonna fall back on? Because physicality seems to be a big part of what got him so much success at 168. At 175.
Sure you want to get physical with guys up there? They might get physical with you.
I like the fight.
This is a legitimate acid test for David Benavidez.